Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to talk about the latest episode of Star Trek Prodigy. It was called Terror Firma, which is a takeoff on terra firma, which means firm ground or strong ground in Latin. So this episode starts off where the crew discovers that they have a long walk ahead of them to get back to the ship after it landed far away, after Gwyn tried to take off with it from the crazy planet that they were on and was brought down far from where it had been by the vines that grabbed onto it. And the other reason they have to walk far is because the planet swallowed the runaway. So it's like a killer planet. In fact, they end up calling it Murder Planet, even though Rock wanted to call it Larry. Anyway, so it's kind of like Murder Planet Larry, which is kind of funny. Anyway, an injured Gwyn declines Rock's help to walk or to be carried, and she uses her pliable tool that we've talked about before to reinforce her legs so that she can walk. I'm wondering if it's some kind of programmable matter, which we've seen on Discovery, but we don't actually know. It turns out that the planet itself is actually a sentient life form, which I guess makes sense given that we've been saying now in this review and the previous one that it seems to do things on its own. And during their walk back to the ship, it's actually actively terraforming so that things keep changing and they can't navigate their way back to the ship, or they can't climb over the obstacles or get through the obstacles that it puts in their path. So they're just going around in circles. When the planet then attacks them with a giant vine being, which sort of has a fake version of the ship's engine in the middle of it, Gwyn lights a vine on fire with a phaser and throws it at the thing, which backs it off, but also lights the whole area on fire, from which they now have to flee. They take shelter in a downed Klingon bird of prey, which is somehow in the Delta Quadrant. And Dahl is uncomfortable telling the rest, of the crew what vision he saw during the events of the previous episode. And because of this, he goes off sort of on his own, causing Gwyn to follow him. And they actually connect a bit here. They have a nice conversation. There's some bonding that takes place. They talk about various things in their pasts. And they realize during this conversation, because they're sort of in a room, there's a big window and they're looking up at the sky, that they can follow the stars to the ship because the stars aren't moving, obviously. Then, however, Dreadnought shows up because the diviner finally arrives at the planet after Gwyn had signaled him where she was last episode. And when he tries to kill the crew and asks her, get out of the way, I'm going to kill these people and you need to get out of the way, she instead stands in front of them, causing her to get shot in her bad leg, which seems to break her tool thing. And it really sort of disables her. And she tells the rest of the crew to run. She then manages to reassemble her tool and crawl to her father some distance away on the planet, who declines to help her as she's being devoured by the planet in order to approach what he thinks is the protostar, because he's laser focused on this thing, on getting it back above all else, and apparently was willing to sacrifice her to do it. But of course, it turns out to be an illusion and not the actual protostar. When the crew returns to the ship, Janeway asks after Gwyn, and the crew flies the ship to where she is, and they rescue her. And it was a pretty cool scene, actually, when they rescue her. She was almost completely devoured, but they rescue. They then all escape in the ship to be pursued by the diviner's ship, and they learn about the protostar that powers the protostar. And when Diviner asks Gwyn to turn over the ship, she tells him, basically, get bent. You chose the ship over me. You abandoned me. See you later, Jack. Goodbye, Felicia. And she engages the protostar, which takes the ship into something called proto-warp, which zips it away in a blink. So I really enjoyed this episode, as I have been enjoying this show. Again, Catherine Janeway is played expertly by Kate Mulgrew, even though she's just a hologram. And the Gwyn character is awesome. Dahl is a flawed guy. He's kind of like a Han Solo type, you know, like a rapscallion type of deal, but a good guy. And of course, Rock and Jankum are good. Zero is good. So they're all good characters, in terms of their alignment versus being evil. And I think they are well defined. I think they're three-dimensional. I think the voice actors do a great job. I just, aside from tiny little technical things, I'm never able to find flaws with this show. I'm enjoying it very much. John Noble is excellent. Of course, I've said this again. I'm probably going to say it a million times before the show goes off the air. But the greatest thing about this episode was that Gwen finally had her opportunity to do what I knew she was going to do, and what I think anybody watching had to know she was going to do, just from how they set up her character to be sort of a sympathetic character. And I don't mean deserving of sympathy. I mean someone who is sympathetic, even though she sort of does her father's bidding as well. You could tell that that wasn't really who she is. And, just from the fact that she's part of the cast, she's going to end up not being their prisoner for the whole series. But, they could have done something different and sort of defied expectations, but they didn't. They did, in fact, have the moment where she realizes her father doesn't really care about anything but this ship that he wants, even her. And where she realized that he's bad, and that she really cares about this crew, about her friends, and that her allegiance to him was sort of something she maintained out of habit, or maybe guilt, or maybe not thinking she had options. And now realizing that she has options, she has friends, and that he's a no count deadbeat ass. She finally said, no, you know what? I'm going to be me. I'm getting out of your shadow. I'm throwing my lot in with these people, and sayonara. And it was excellent. I was so glad they actually followed through on what they've been foreshadowing they were going to do pretty much since her first scene in the season premiere. So it's great, and I'm thrilled, and I love this show. And I really can't say anything else about it, except that I'm bummed that it's off the air for a bunch of weeks now, because they had this was the mid-season finale. It's a 10-episode season. They're taking a break now for some weeks. The good news is that it's been renewed already for season 2, and I think that's great. It's a great show, and I'm loving it. That's really all there is to say. Can't wait for the rest of the season. I'll be back when it's back with my review of the later episodes of the season. Until then, my friends, as always, I wish you all peace and long life.